The studio lights glow warm and familiar, the kind that promise comfort, laughter, and easy conversation. The audience applauds as Rowan Atkinson walks onto the set, smiling politely, waving with that reserved charm people have loved for decades. Lorraine Kelly beams beside him, welcoming him like an old friend. On the surface, everything feels safe, predictable. Television as usual, they sit. The applause fades. Cameras roll in close. Lorraine starts where everyone expects. Mr. Bean, Blackadder, a career that shaped generations. Rowan answers calmly, even warmly. He jokes lightly about physical comedy, about silence being louder than words. The audience laughs. For a moment, it feels nostalgic, almost comforting, like revisiting a simpler time when comedy was just comedy. But then something shifts. Lorraine's tone softens, slows. She pivots the conversation. She mentions today's climate, mentions responsibility, mentions how jokes can land differently now. Rowan nods at first, listening carefully. His smile doesn't vanish, but it tightens. His hands fold together. He chooses his words with precision. He says comedy should challenge power, not obey it. He says satire exists to make people uncomfortable. His voice remains calm, almost gentle. But the room feels different now. The audience doesn't laugh as easily. Few people clap. Others stay silent. Lorraine leans in. She doesn't attack him, not openly. She reframes. She talks about harm. About voices that feel targeted. About how platforms matter. It's still polite, but there's an edge now. It's a subtle implication that hangs in the air. Rowan pauses longer than before. He looks toward the audience, then back at Lorraine. His jaw tightens. The playful energy that defined the first minutes is gone. In its place is something heavier. Frustration, maybe even disappointment. He begins to respond, explaining that offense is subjective, that fear should never dictate. Lorraine interrupts him. Not loudly, not aggressively. It's just enough. The interruption lands hard. Rowan stops mid-sentence. The studio goes quiet. You can almost hear the hum of the lights. He exhales slowly, eyes fixed forward, as if weighing whether this conversation is still what he agreed to. Lorraine asks one more question, framed as concern, but carrying judgment beneath it. Rowan doesn't answer right away. He stares at her, and in that silence, everyone watching can feel it. Something is cracked. Something that won't be smoothed over with laughter. And just before he speaks, you realize this interview is no longer under anyone's control. Rowan finally speaks. But his voice is slower now, measured in a way that signals restraint, not comfort. He says he understands concern, says he understands empathy. Then he draws a line. He says comedy that asks permission is no longer comedy, it's obedience. The words land heavy. A ripple moves through the audience. Some nod. Some shift. In their seats, Lorraine responds quickly. Too quickly. She thanks him for his honesty, then pivots again. She brings up past comments he's made about free speech. She quotes critics. She asks whether his position ignores people who feel genuinely hurt. Her tone remains calm, but the framing is sharp. It's no longer curiosity. It's a challenge. Rowan's eyes narrow slightly, corrects her politely, saying that's not what he meant. He explains that being offended does not equal being harmed. The discomfort is often the beginning of thought. He reminds her that satire has always upset someone, always. Lorraine interrupts again. This time the audience reacts. A few murmurs, a nervous laugh. She suggests that words from someone with his influence carry extra weight. She asks whether there should be limits, clear limits on what comedians say today. That's when Rowan leans forward. He says limits are decided by power, not morality. He says history shows that censorship always claims to be protecting someone. His voice rises slightly now, not angry, but firm, controlled. The kind of control that comes before something breaks. Lorraine pushes back. She says no one is censoring him. She says this is about accountability. She says times have changed. Her smile is gone now completely. This isn't banter. This is ideology meeting resistance. The studio feels smaller, tighter. Cameras cut between their faces. Rowan's hands unclasp. He gestures once, sharply, saying that accountability without freedom is just fear dressed up as kindness. There's a pause. Then Lorraine says it. She asks whether comedians, like him, are simply afraid of losing relevance. In a more inclusive world, the air leaves the room. Rowan doesn't blink. He looks directly at her and says, quietly but clearly, "That's not what I said, and you know it." Applause breaks out, scattered but loud enough to matter. Lorraine opens her mouth to respond, but Rowan continues. He says twisting words is exactly how honest conversations die. He says if this discussion is about labeling rather than listening, then it was never fair to begin with. He reaches up and touches the microphone clip to his jacket, not removing it, just touching it, and in that small movement, everyone watching understands something irreversible is about to happen. The room doesn't recover from that moment. Lorraine straightens in her chair, her voice carefully neutral now.
Ice.
The kind broadcasters use when they're trying to regain control. She says this is a conversation, not an attack.
Ice.
She says viewers at home deserve clarity. But the warmth never comes back. It's gone. Rowan nods once, slowly. He says clarity is exactly what's missing. He says conversations fail when one side decides the moral outcome before the words are even spoken. His tone is still calm, but the patience is thinning. Each sentence feels heavier, sharper. This is no longer a comedian talking. This is a man defending a principle. Lorraine counters by invoking responsibility. Again, platform, influence, consequences. She frames it as protection, not restriction. She insists no one is silencing him. He's here, after all, speaking. Freely on national television, Rowan lets out a short breath, almost a laugh, but there's no humor in it. He says freedom that survives only when approved is not freedom. He says the moment artists begin self-censoring out of fear, culture stops evolving. A few people in the audience clap. Others remain frozen, unsure whether it's acceptable to react. The tension becomes physical. Shoulders tighten. Faces harden. The cameras linger a beat too long on Lorraine's expression, controlled but strained. She interrupts him again, saying his argument sounds like dismissing real pain. She asks whether he's willing to accept that some jokes simply don't belong anymore. That's when Rowan's composure cracks just slightly. He says pain cannot be the sole judge of truth. He says if emotional discomfort becomes a veto, then honesty becomes impossible. His voice rises, not shouting, but carrying a weight that fills the studio. He says comedy didn't lose its soul, courage did. There's a sharp intake of breath from the audience. Lorraine responds firmly now. She says language shapes reality. She says media has a duty to push progress forward. The word progress hangs between them like a challenge. Rowan looks around the studio, then back at her. He says progress that demands silence is not progress at all. It's compliance. And compliance, he says, has never produced art worth remembering. The silence afterward is brutal. No applause. No laughter. Just cameras rolling and a nation watching two worldviews collide in real time. Rowan reaches up and loosens the microphone clip. Not enough to take it off, enough to make a statement. And as Lorraine opens her mouth to speak again, Rowan quietly says, "If this is the game, I don't want to play it." The studio gasps, and the producers hesitate, knowing they're seconds away from something they can't undo. The clip explodes online within minutes. Short, sharp edits flood social media. Rowan standing up, the microphone click, Lorraine calling his name. Context collapses into seconds-long fragments, and the internet does what it always does. It chooses sides before the full sentence is finished. Some hail Rowan as a truth-teller, finally saying what others are afraid to say. They call it courage. They call it resistance. Others accuse him of arrogance, of refusing accountability, of walking away instead of listening. They call it privilege. They call it entitlement. It's the same moment becomes two completely different stories, depending on who's telling it. Commentators pile in. It's morning panels, evening debates. Everyone suddenly has a take. Was this about comedy or power? Was Lorraine holding him accountable or cornering him? Was Rowan defending free speech or protecting his legacy? The questions multiply, but the answers only divide. Lorraine releases a brief statement. Professional, careful. She says the show welcomes difficult conversations and stands by asking tough questions. No apology, no escalation. Just enough to hold her ground. Rowan says nothing. That silence becomes louder than the walk-off itself. Media. Analysts dissect his body language. The pauses, the tone, the moment he touched the microphone. Some say it was calculated, others say it was raw. But everyone agrees on one thing. That chair left empty on live television struck a nerve far beyond entertainment, because this wasn't really about a joke or a comment or even two people disagreeing. It was about who gets to decide the limits of speech and how those limits are enforced. Viewers rewatch the clip, noticing details they missed the first time. The interruptions, the framing, the subtle shift from discussion to judgment. And slowly, uncomfortably, a bigger question starts to form. If a world-famous comedian can be cornered on live TV for defending artistic freedom, what happens to voices with less power? The moment becomes symbolic, not because Rowan walked off, but because he refused to play along, and now the culture is left staring at itself, arguing over who crossed the line, while quietly realizing the line itself is no longer clear. The screen fades on that empty chair, and the question lingers, unanswered and unsettling. In a world where even words are policed, who decides what you're allowed to say next? If this moment made you uncomfortable, good. That means it mattered. Because conversations like this aren't meant to be easy. They're meant to force us to think, to question, to decide where we stand when pressure replaces dialogue. Now I want to hear from you. Was Rowan Atkinson standing up for free speech or walking away from accountability? Was Lorraine Kelly asking tough questions or framing a verdict before the answers? And most importantly, what does this clash say about the direction media, comedy, and culture are heading right now? Drop your honest opinion in the comments. Don't copy headlines. Don't repeat talking points. Say what you actually think. Read other comments. Respectfully. That's how real conversation survives. If you believe discussions like this should be explored deeply, not reduced to viral clips, hit like so this video reaches more people who are willing to think beyond the surface. If you want more cinematic, real-time breakdowns of media moments that expose power, pressure, and truth, subscribe and turn on notifications. This channel doesn't chase noise. It follows the fault lines where culture is actually cracking. Because silence is easy. Thinking isn't. In the next moment like this might already be unfolding.